Hello, this is Daniel Raymond, the voice behind Ray's Guide, and this is going to be the first of a series of deeper dive analyses of the presentations at Citizencon, starting with Destination Adventure, or at least the first three-quarters of it. The session started off with both new and old topic of the distribution centers. We have previously seen these described as the new underground facilities, but in the form of these new distribution centers, they are concentrating only on the above-ground part. What is driving these new locations is hangars, and what is driving hangars is physicalized cargo. It simply isn't reasonable to expect a hauler player to be out on an exposed landing pad with both their cargo and ship exposed and vulnerable for quite extended periods of time. So I propose that all the outposts where we now have landing pads would need to be upgraded to something more, what I call cargo depots, bigger than the tiny outposts but smaller than the landing zones and space stations. And that's the role where these fill. Actually more than fill, because I'm not sure if you've been to a real-life distribution center, but they tend to be pretty plain and utilitarian, without the massive public spaces and executive suites. This is more like a regional headquarters facility for the operations division, which is not an unreasonable thing to have, or at least to have some of them. But consider how many R-Corp mining facilities we have on Stanton. Would all of them be this elaborate? That strains credulity. So there needs to be a junior version of this that shrinks the massive tower in huge plinth and has a much more bare-bones set of public spaces. Let's call these branch distribution centers and the huge displays of executive ego main distribution centers. It shouldn't be that hard to do, and don't take that as saying that this design is bad, only that having every place we visit doing cargo be like this would stop being impressive. From an architectural perspective, if you don't know what brutalism was, well, this is it. In fact, it is more classic brutalism than even Hurston Towers because of how much it loves huge masses of exposed concrete. And among the few commendable traits of brutalism is that the name is refreshingly honest about itself. Whenever movies want to portray a heartless dystopian setting, Brutalist Architecture is their go-to style, which, considering that many players will be visiting here to commit larceny and murder, I think that not getting too sympathetic to the facility or its owners is a good choice. Interestingly, Montreal is home of one of the few brutalist buildings that is still universally liked, Habitat 67, as well as one of its most problem-prone, or actually one of the most problem-prone buildings of any building style, the Olympic Stadium. Which brings me to the raids of the distribution facilities, and one of the clever things that they are doing that may have been missed by many attendees, and that is that the zone that they are doing the raids in is different than the zone when you would be visiting when delivering packages and getting missions, and that both of these are entirely separate from the wings off to the side where the hangars are. Which is good, because if I'm just showing up to deliver a package, I mostly just want to mind my own business and not suddenly find myself unwillingly in the crossfire of an ore grade. Unless, of course, the idea of suddenly playing John McClane to their Hans Gruber is being fun.
Yippee-ki-yay, mother...
But it is important that the choice be yours. The video of the raid showed a lot of cowering warehouse workers, so I'm presuming that there will be additional sentence length from killing them, because I'm pretty sure you're going to be crime stat 5 by the end of this either way. I also noticed the trolley that they were pushing held 2x6 1SCU boxes, which looked like they could be stacked too high. However, if you just squared off this corner, you could fit 2x8 too high, which would be a 32 SCU box, which is the largest standard size. Why wouldn't they make a cargo trolley that could hold all of the various sizes of containers? And while we're on it, why is this a trolley and not a sit-upon vehicle? It's not as though you as a person are actually pushing that much weight, and even if you were, you're pushing it so far off the center of gravity that you'd be just going around in circles, particularly if it really is meant to be a hovercraft. Anyway, the wall-mounted cargo racks and using the tractor beams to create jump puzzles is an interesting twist, although I hope we won't be having to deal with this system simply to load and unload our cargo into our chips. Which brings me to the freight elevator, and as I've said before, as someone who doesn't mind the idea of playing 3D Tetris in my space game, but I recognize that not everybody is like that. This can't be a mandatory system. The option for automated loading must still be there. In a prior video, I described the simple way of doing this. If your ship is stored at the ASOP terminal, and then from the freight terminal, you direct the cargo to the ship that is in storage and not to the freight elevator, it is loaded automatically. The status at the ASOP terminal would switch from stored to loading, and there would be a time, just like there is a claim timer. And you can expedite the loading status, just like you can expedite the claim timer. So most of the work is already done. Now, one of the big applauses during Citizencon was when they opened up the freight elevator and showed vehicles on it. Not only was this unexpected, but it answered a long-standing issue. How can we spawn a ship and spawn a rover inside of it? The answer now, obviously, is we don't. We spawn the ship, call up the vehicle from the freight elevator, and drive it aboard. Also, calling up weapons and components was interesting too. The question is, does this really obsolete the ship loadout manager? And the answer is not quite. There are still things like paints and hidden items like internal missile launchers and items that can't be reached from underneath like the retractable guns on some ships. And there are items too large, such as there being no way you can get the large components in the Hercules out of their locations, down the hallway, and out the elevator. There's just not enough space for that. So I suspect that the loadout manager will still be around. Then Todd Pappy came on stage and talked about player-built bases, and thanks to my professional background, I have a lot. And by a lot, I mean possibly more than one video's worth to contribute about player-based building tools. So that will have to wait for another day. For today, though, we still have our IAE Week ship giveaway coming up for the winner's choice of the Galaxy Complete, the massive modular mining moving medical machine. And did you also catch about how it's now going to have a base building role too? Or the brand new Big Box Bargain Bazaar, the Mergerman. Just be a member and be entered automatically. Or subscribe and comment, somehow including the secret word. And the secret word for this video is the name of the style of architecture that the distribution centers are. Fly safe, keep it real, and I'll see you in the verse. This is Daniel Raymond for Ray's Guide.